So I've heard that TED is really about ideas that change the world, and I think that we change the world maybe by changing ourselves first. So I'm actually going to ask everybody, is this supposed to work? Because this can't count into my 18 minutes if it doesn't work. Okay, wait a minute. I'm going to ask everybody a question. What are you going to do with your newfound freedom? And a whole bunch of you may not think you have this newfound freedom, but if you're from my generation, then you realize that you do. So I'm going to tell you a couple of stories. I grew up in the 1960s and 70s, and it was a crazy time. It was also this golden age of media. And when I was coming of age, a lot of amazing things happened. There was the very first presidential televised debate. Imagine that, if you can believe it or not. The Beatles came to America, or actually Ed Sullivan brought the Beatles to America. The civil rights movement was in full force. We had a war that was brought into our living rooms every single night by the embedded press in Vietnam. Man landed on the moon, and when I was in college, this incredible thing happened called Watergate, and a president of the United States resigned. And across all of that, there was another cool thing happening, which was called the Creative Revolution, and a guy named Bill Bernbach at an advertising agency named after him redefined how advertising would be done. And we ended up with some really cool stuff that was, for the first time, emotional and entertaining and interesting. For me, what mattered more than anything weren't even those events, despite how significant they were. What mattered to me was, wow, media. Media is amazing. It comes into our lives, and it tells us what to think, what to feel, what to know, what to believe. And I said, that's what I want to do. I want to be one of those guys who has all that power and all that influence and controls the message and the content. So I said, I'm either going to grow up to be Walter Cronkite or Ed Sullivan, not really Ed Sullivan, but Bill Bernbach or Woodward and Bernstein, because that was the cool thing to be. And so I ended up going into the advertising business because actually that was the easiest way out. You didn't have to work quite as hard as you did in some of those other things. And I managed to survive to now and live through this remarkable, incredible change that has happened, because all these powerful forces, all these media voices have been replaced by new people who are completely different. Larry Page and Ev Williams, you know who these guys are, Steve Jobs and Stephen Chen. And these are the new media forces. And what's interesting about these media forces is they don't control anything. Instead, what they do is they liberate us. Now, any of you guys who are students and in your 20s, you take this for granted, you've lived through this your whole lives, but if you're my age or even in between, this is this remarkable thing that has happened where all of a sudden we're not at the disposal only of a small group of people who control media, tell us what to think, what to read, what to believe, but instead we can become that and do that ourselves. And if you're in my business, you spend your entire life doing this. You deliver other people's messages to other people's audiences with other people's money. Essentially, your talent for hire to accomplish what somebody else wants to accomplish. And that's sort of cool because you take your skills and your knowledge and your abilities and you do something with it. And you can feel proud about what you make. But we don't have to only do that anymore. So I'm going to tell you a story that is a little bit the difference between advertising, when you're doing it for somebody else, and social media and the new technology and all the liberation we have from those four monster characters. And it goes like this. So I'm in an airport. I'm going actually to Chicago. I have to give a talk at Sears. I see an ad for the Marriott Hotels, when it has to be right. And frankly, when doesn't it? And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I'm going to go on a business trip. I'm going to stay in a hotel. Of course I'm going to stay in a hotel where it has to be done right. And that's a good idea. So I decide I'll stay at a Marriott hotel when I get to Chicago. So I check into the Marriott, and it's nice. It's got a nice lobby. The room's okay. The bed's okay, et cetera. And I have the speech the next morning, and I go to sleep that night. And in the middle of the night, I hear this really weird sound in my room. And for a while, I think that either someone's trying to get in, or there's a weird animal loose in my room, or something strange is going on. And I wake up, and believe it or not, there's water dripping onto the pillow on the other side of my bed. And that noise is each trip. And I'm thinking, wow, that's bizarre. So I don't get overly panicked. Just in the middle of the night, I think I'm going to call the front desk, and they're going to get me a new room, and everything's going to be okay. So I call, and I explain that there's water dripping from the ceiling right onto my bed, and could they please do something for me? And whoever answers the phone says, we're sorry, sir, there's nothing we can do whatsoever because the hotel is booked. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what about that ad that told me when it has to be done right and frankly when doesn't it? There's something inconsistent with this ad. But fortunately, I know the capabilities inherent now from what Larry and Steve and Ev have created. So I pull my mattress off the bed. I put it in the corner of the room. I get some tissues. I plug up my ears. I sleep through the night. I get up in the morning. I'm exhausted. I have to give a speech, coincidentally a speech about social media. And I'm thinking, God, I hate the Marriott. And then I realized, whoa, wait a minute. This is the greatest thing that ever happened. This is so fortuitous. I have the most remarkable story I could ever be handed. So I get up right away. I turn on my computer and I put out on Twitter, hotel room ceiling leaked, mattress soaked, slept on the floor, Marriott response, we're full, nothing we can do. What the Marriott? So I actually was going to be a nice guy. I was just going to do this quickly enough to get a screenshot and then take the screenshot and use it as a little case study at my presentation that day. But it took off faster than I could take it down. So the next thing you know, people are retweeting this story, and it's starting to get some chatter, and there's dozens of tweets in the stream, and other people are saying, whoa, that's so wrong, and call my uncle, he works for Marriott, and this thing starts to take off a little bit. And then I say, hey, okay, I've used what Ev Williams gave me. Why don't I use what Steve Jobs gave me? I have a new iPhone 4, and it has a video camera in it. I think I'll make a video. Oh, and it's got iMovie in it, so after I make the video, I can stick it up on YouTube.
Dear Marriott, you have one very unhappy guest. This is the leak on my ceiling directly above the corner of my bed. This is my soaking wet pillow, and here you can see my box spring and where I spent the night listening to the annoying plop, plop, plop of water dripping.
So you get the idea. Anyway, you can do stuff like this. Now, you have to have enough courage to let people see you with your bed head, which is a little more sharing than some people are comfortable with, but you get used to it after a while. And then I said, oh, you know what? I also know Larry Page, and he taught me SEO, so I have a blog. I think I'll write a little blog post. I won't be evil. I'll actually offer constructive advice to the Marriott, such as, hey, you could have offered me a mattress on the floor in a conference room. There aren't people sleeping on the conference room in the middle of the night. And I told them what they should have as a Bill of Rights and how they should live up to their advertising, etc. And when the Marriott didn't do anything when I called in the middle of the night, how interesting. After a half a dozen tweets, a blog post, a little YouTube video, within a half an hour, I get a phone call from the manager. And he asked me what I want, and I said, here's what I want you to do. I want a public apology on my blog, and I want you to go on Twitter and publicly apologize on Twitter. I got this great email back to me as well. I replied to your blog. I had no problem doing that, but I've never used Twitter before. Let me first of all say that I don't know anything about Twitter, so if I sound ignorant, I am. We're a franchise. I don't have access to the Marriott International account. I signed myself up to publicly apologize. I hope they work. Once again, I'm truly sorry and hope your presentation to CEOs was a great success. I'm looking forward to reading your blog at my staff meeting next Tuesday. Really interesting stuff. As I'm technologically challenged, I should probably catch up on this, don't you think? And then the next thing you know, he invites me to come out and speak to his employees at the Marriott. So I'm thinking, whoa, this is cool, right? Instead of delivering somebody else's message with somebody else's money to somebody else's target, I'm now in charge. I'm in control. I can do some pretty cool things. Media is awesome. I have a really good friend named John Windsor, and his kid loves airplanes, and he makes a little picture of an airplane. He sends it off to Boeing. I want to design airplanes. Here's my suggestion for Boeing's next airplane. He gets back a form letter from Boeing that says, like many large companies, we do not accept unsolicited ideas. Experience showed us that most ideas have already been considered by our engineers, and there can be unintended consequences to simply accepting these ideas. Signed the lawyers at Boeing. Well, John is sort of like me, and he believes in this stuff too. So what does John do? Well, he writes a blog post, and he tweets on Twitter saying, Boeing, we're on the edge of social media. This isn't really how you should behave. And the next thing you know, the New York Times is writing an article about how Boeing knows nothing about how to use social media. TV stations are putting little Harry Windsor on television, and Boeing smartens up. They fly Harry to Seattle, give him a tour of the plant, show him how the plant's made, and they put on an exhibit of artwork by kids who were designing airplanes in honor of Harry, and they have now learned the lessons of how to behave in the new age. Now, what's going on here? This is really interesting. Instead of the brands influencing us, we now influence the brands. Now, that's really cool. That's sort of freedom. But I also think that freedom maybe isn't just for playing around and doing stuff like that. Maybe this freedom that we have is something that we should put to even greater use. So if we think about ourselves in this business, we have, I hope, a whole bunch of really interesting talents and capabilities that we sell. We sell day in and day out to clients and brands, so that we can help them move more Coke and hamburgers and pizzas, etc. And our capabilities are pretty impressive. We know how to create content. We know how to gather a community. We know how to engage with people in real time. We know how to tell stories. We know how to teach other people how to do things. We know how to mobilize followings. We know how to persuade and influence, right? That's what we grew up learning to do in this profession. But in the old days, when I started out, we did it for others using other people's media. And now we don't have to do that anymore. So I'm going to just tell you a couple of stories, right? A couple of years ago, there's a young woman. She had worked for ad agencies in Canada. Her name's Amanda Rose. And she gets this idea because social media lets her get this idea. She says, hey, what if we use Twitter to try to get a gathering to maybe get some people together and raise some money? She starts a little thing in London. She gets 250 people to show up in Trafalgar Square to do a little fundraising for homeless people. And she raises $250 or $500 or $1,000. And she calls this thing Twestival. But in the world of social media, of course, we don't have to own anything. Just like those guys have liberated us, we can create things that we let go of as well and liberate others. And so she let Twestival go and gave it to the world. And today there are 133 global Twestivals that take place in different cities around the world. Last year they raised $400,000 for charity water alone, $1.2 million altogether, all because one person with an idea and a Twitter account decided to do something good using that list of skills I referred to a minute ago. I have a guy in Boston who I became friends with after the fact. He lost his job at an advertising agency as a copywriter because all of these new technologies made an old advertising copywriter less relevant. And he and many, many others, as you know, a few years ago were out of work. His name is Eric Prue, and he decided he was going to do something. He was going to write a blog called Please Feed the Animals and try to get people to share ideas for how to reinvent their lives and help each other get jobs. And then after he sees that he's encouraging people, he has a second idea, which is, I think I'll make a video about the lives of people who are changing and the new jobs they're doing and stuff like that. And he calls it Lemonade, and he says, I'll just make this little video and stick it on YouTube. But he starts to talk about it on Twitter. And then what happens is a production company sees it and says, hey, we'll be the production company. And Sony Pictures sees it and says, we'll give you camera equipment. And then I catch on, and I'm thinking, wow, this is cool, so I'm tweeting about it. That's where we met. He tweets to me and says, hey, could you help me out? We're trying to see if we can get Virgin America to fly people from the East Coast to the West Coast so we can shoot on the West Coast and make this movie. I tweet to Virgin America. Within half an hour, they agree to fly the entire crew from the East Coast to the West Coast to shoot a movie called Lemonade, which ended up being pretty successful. I don't know if it played or debuted here, but it played in an awful lot of cities around the country. Now, Eric is doing the same thing for the city of Detroit about reinvention, crowdfunding the movie by selling frames at a time on a crowdfunding site. Pretty awesome. The guy keynotes now at South by, at PSFK, etc. One guy, a blog, a Twitter account, and a dream to do something for other people. You guys probably all know the story of Dan Savage. I mean, this thing is absolutely amazing. So granted, he's a reporter. He has a following. Writes for the Seattle Weekly. He's devastated, as many people are, over the suicide of Billy Lucas. And he realizes, God, you know what? What do? We tell everybody else not to be prejudiced, and we tell everybody else how they should behave, but what we never do is we help the kids out themselves by letting them know that things will get better. You know, it may suck when you're 12 or 13 and people are prejudiced against you and your older brothers beat you up or whatever it is, but you know what? things will get better. So he starts a thing on YouTube, puts up a video with him and his partner, and the next thing you know, 10,000 videos have been created by a lot of other people telling their stories of how it got better for them. And then, of course, there's Obama, and then there's Hillary Clinton, and then there's Sarah Silverman. This thing takes off, and within a month and a half, 30 million views. And maybe it saved some kid's life. That'd be pretty cool. Last story I'll tell you about is a woman I've also come to know, which is also the great thing about social media, the connections that you make. Her name is Sheena Mathiakin. And Sheena was a designer. Am I doing okay for time?
Yeah.
Okay. Sheena was a designer in New York. She also wanted to do something good. She'd grown up in India, where so many kids are poor, they don't get to go to school. She decides, I want to do something to raise money for kids to go to school. And she has this idea. I'm going to design a little black dress. I'm going to wear this little black dress every single day for 365 days, and that's the sacrifice that I'm going to make. I'm going to sacrifice my own wardrobe and adopt the simplicity in order to raise money so that I can send kids to school and they can afford to buy uniforms. So she does this, and what happens is she puts it on Twitter, she puts it on Facebook, she puts it on her blog. People start to send in, donate accessories, and they donate scarves and bags, etc. And she shows what you can do with this one little black dress that she wears every day for 365 days. They taped it. Are you guys hearing me anyway? Okay, good. All right, so this is going to screw up my video, though, I bet. So anyway, she does this. She does this every day, and it starts to catch on. So after a month or so, she's got $20, then $40, then $80. Then a bunch of people get it, and they tweet about it. Next thing she's got 1,000, then 2,000, then 4,000. Then New York Times writes a piece, and then somebody else writes a piece. And by the end of the year, she's raised $105,000 to send kids to school in India. But then she has this idea. She says, hey, I could make this a living, maybe. What if I started a company? What if my company was designed to reinvent fashion, design, and retailing? What if what I did is I designed a new dress every month, I got a celebrity to wear it, the proceeds went to charity, we sold the dress, they were always all made out of sustainable materials, and people who bought from us would feel as if they're doing something good for the environment. They're expressing themselves, they're downsizing in simplicity, we're raising money for great causes, and I can be a new kind of entrepreneur that redefines a business model. And this is the kind of stuff that we can do now with our freedom. We've all been liberated. We have been granted a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure so that we can do this kind of stuff. All of these things are free. Everything on this page is free. WordPress, Posterous, Tumblr, YouTube, Twitter, AppMaker, Storify, etc. We're crazy not to use them. So what should we do with our newfound freedom? We should become pirates, punks, hackers, use our skills, change the system. Thank you.
Here we go.